Hello and welcome to The Olive Tree with me, Julia Fisher, the programme that brings you the stories of believers living in Israel and the West Bank, both Jews and Arabs. It goes without saying that identity is very important in the Middle East. Whether you're Jewish or Arab, Christian or Muslim matters. It also matters that people are able to recognise your identity, and anything out of the ordinary attracts attention. My guest today does not fit the usual pattern. He is Arab, an Israeli citizen, and a Christian. He lives in Haifa, in northern Israel, where he grew up. You would expect that he'd go to an Arab church, but in fact for the past 13 years he's been the pastor of a Jewish Messianic congregation called Beit Eliyahu, Elijah's house, and as far as I know, he is the only Arab Christian in Israel to be leading a Jewish congregation. As you'll hear, he's a humble man and reluctant to talk about himself. However, when we met in Haifa recently, he agreed to share a little of his story, to give us an insight into what God is doing in Israel today between Jews and Arabs.
Well, I grew up actually in this congregation from the age of 7 or something, and I was blessed to have leaders both for the children's ministry and then the youth ministry who really wanted to see the gifts that the young people had and how to develop them. So I became the youth leader quite quickly, and then I just decided I wanted to learn the scriptures more. After preaching already, but I just felt really the need to grow. So I ended up taking seminary and then being called back to be the pastor here. It wasn't the plan originally. I had other plans for myself, but God has changed them, yes.
Is it true to say that you are the only Israeli Arab who's pastoring a Messianic congregation, or are there others like you?
I haven't heard of others. Not in Israel, definitely. Probably not other places either, yeah.
So here you are with this Jewish congregation, Hebrew-speaking only congregation. What sort of people come?
Many, just different kinds of people. I mean, Israel is not homogeneous society, so that's how the congregation is too. People from many different backgrounds. Some from Orthodox Jewish background, some from secular Jewish background, some Gentiles. I mean, some people who have a very rough background in prostitution or drugs and so forth, that the Lord has saved and changed their lives, and others who were very well off and the Lord has changed their lives too. So it's many different kinds of people and all ages. I mean, the oldest one is 97 soon, and the two youngest are still in their mother's womb, so they're on their way out any time now.
What are the challenges that you face as a pastor of a congregation here in Haifa?
I think basically it's the same challenge as any pastor faces, because when you're dealing with people who are precious, God's children, and it doesn't make it easy always. Of course, in Israel, it's more intense in many ways. I mean, when the congregation people are so different, you can say one sentence to 3 people and they will understand it in 3 different ways, and probably 2 of them might be angry with you. So there is the potential for misunderstanding, the potential for conflict is in one sense larger than, I guess, a typical congregation in England. But this makes it even more important to really know who we believe in and what we're standing on. If we lose sight of Yeshua, and I keep on saying it to the congregation, any congregation can easily turn into a country club, into a whatever activity thing. And I think in Israel it's a bit harder than in England maybe, because we really need to stand for our faith and know what we're believing in, and keep on looking unto the Lord and not to other people.
You were saying earlier as we were talking that you really do believe that here that it is such a spiritual conflict, that every conflict that's on the news to do with Israel and the Middle East is actually spiritual in its origin.
Yeah, in its origins, spiritual, and I mean there is no logical explanation to why this conflict is the way it is and why it is treated the way it is treated, and that's why we pray a lot for our country. I mean, everybody, also you in England, you are called to pray for your leaders, and we do that intensively all the time. Somebody said that the Israeli prime minister would love to be a prime minister in England just for the vacation, so he can relax, because we really need to pray for our leaders. So they need the spiritual support of God's people. And because Israel is who Israel is, and Israel is because of what God made them to be, there's a spiritual war.
Just explain that spiritual war, because for many people in England, they say, well, why should I bother about what's going on in Israel? But what actually is the spiritual dynamic? What is the war all about?
It's about God's plan, God's good plan, and the enemy not wanting this plan to be fulfilled. As simple as that.
And what is God's good plan?
I mean, that's exactly the Bible's messages, that he wants to bring everybody to know him. And the way he did it is through this people. And he didn't choose Israel because they were the best, or because Abraham was so amazing and his CV was the best, but because God chose him. It's a choice of grace, and God showed his grace towards Israel all the time. Some people think Israel doesn't deserve God's attention anymore. Well, they never deserved God's attention in the first place, and throughout history. God had to deal with his people, he had to punish his people, he was mad at his people. But all the time he loved his people and he was faithful to his people. And for me it is a spiritual truth that I need for my own, as an Arab or you as a British Gentile or whatever, we need to really grasp this truth of the scriptures in God's relationship to Israel to really understand God's relationship to us. God chose Abraham and he told him, you're going to be a blessing to all nations. So God had you in sight and me already back then. He showed him the stars in the sky and says, that's how many your descendants are going to be. And we are those stars that God has already seen back then. But it's not only that. He wants, let's put it this way. I can't trust God's promises to me, to Shmuel, if Israel can't trust his promises to Israel.
That's very interesting, because in the UK in particular, there's a very strong support for replacement theology.
In one sense, I disagree with this theology, that's one thing. But when I met people who believe in it, real people, and they really believe in it somehow, using the same Bible I use, I don't know how, but still they do, I mainly feel sorry for them because I can't see how you can have assurance, any kind of assurance of God's faithfulness and trusting in his promises, if what he told Israel is not valid anymore. Israel messed up, so they're not my people anymore. Oh boy, I messed up so many times. Poor me if God would have treated me this way. I'm not holding God in my hand, he's holding me in his hand, and there's no power that will remove me from his hand. That's his promise. And that's the promise we're trying to convey to people here. That it's about God's promises, God's word. You can trust him. And if Israel can't trust him, if Israel is, that's it, it's over, then what makes me or you or anyone else better? Why should you trust him? There are many things I don't understand, that's obvious, because I'm in his hand, he's not in mine. So there are many things I don't understand. But he doesn't ask me to understand, he asks me to trust him.
So Shmuel, here we are. The state of Israel has been here now for 60 plus years. The body of believers has been growing steadily, particularly in the last 20 years. Something's going on. If I'm asking you to look forward now to the next 4 or 5 years, what are you anticipating God is going to be doing here?
I'm sure he will continue to be faithful as he has been till now, and I really hope and anticipate to see a growth in the body of Messiah in Israel. One thing is, of course, growth in numbers, that more and more people will get to know Yeshua. But also that more and more people we see today compared to years ago, that more and more Israelis are aware of the fact that there are Jews who believe in Yeshua and they're still Jewish. But we would like to see this grow even more, this awareness among the people of Yeshua in Israel.
So when it comes to praying for for you and for Israel's destiny, and the destiny of the body of believers here, what would you say? What are the most important things that people listening to this program can pray for?
Paul said it, Apostle Paul said it in a few words, that they might be saved in Romans. And that's was his heartache, he said. And I think we need to pray that, and this is God's heart for his people still, that more Israelis would be saved. That's very obvious. And as this growth happens, there's going to be more persecution, I believe. So we need to pray for protection and really wisdom for his people here. Also pray for the body of Messiah, that it will not just grow in numbers, but also continue to grow in maturity. In maturity both on the leadership level and also among everybody else. Pray for what's going on with the youth camps, and teaching the youth leaders, and that's where we need to grow also in maturity as a body.
Shmuel Aweida, an Arab pastor of a Jewish Messianic congregation in Haifa, northern Israel. A remarkable man. You're listening to The Olive Tree with me, Julia Fisher, the programme that brings you news of some of the surprising things God is doing in Israel today, despite the politics of the region. Having heard Shmuel's story, you may like to find out more. Well, the Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund is a small charity based in the UK that seeks to prayerfully and financially support needy believers living in Israel and the Palestinian areas. We send out a bi-monthly newsletter, and we take small groups to Israel to meet some of the people you hear on this programme. So do get in touch if you'd like to know more. You'll find information and articles on our website, www.olivetreefund.org, where you can also leave a donation. Or you can write to me, Julia Fisher, at the Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund, P.O. Box 850, Horsham, RH12 9GA in the UK. Thanks for your company today. I'll be back at the same time next week with more news and interviews from the Holy Land. Until then, goodbye.